Season 40, Episode 11. Let's chat! All right, so listen, how many of you are feeling like the temperature has risen? It seems to me we're playing Survivor now, and this is what we look for in watching this show. The dynamics are heating up, and the players are playing. And this phase, when the interactions are this way, when the dynamics are as frequent and as well exposed in the edit as they were in last night's episode, there's lots to talk about and there's lots to enjoy with respect to who we are as game players of Survivor and who we are as viewers of the game. So buckle your seatbelts. Ready? All right. Let me look at my notes. So it starts off with Jeremy sitting at camp. He used his power. We know he should have used that advantage to remove himself from the tribal council last week, because if he hadn't, he would have been gone. But as they come back into camp...
Jeremy was the target. Now nobody will explain to him what happened. They're like, why'd you leave?
Jeremy's asking them, what happened? What went on? Jeremy knew kind of what went on. That's why he left. He sensed that things were going to be problematic. But people are wandering back into camp with their heads down and they're not willing to tell him. I'm not telling. I'm not saying anything. Oh, no. What happened? Jeremy keeps asking and nobody will explain to Jeremy what happened at Tribal Council and what's really going on there. So those players now, with Jeremy having walked out last week, walking back into camp, have to completely and totally reset. They hadn't planned for Jeremy to walk out of Tribal. They had planned for Jerry to be voted out. And now they have to recalculate all of how they're going to move forward and what their risks are and what did they do wrong that he didn't go. All kinds of interesting new combinations of data will produce all kinds of new pathways forward. And you'll see that as this episode unfolds. Or you did see that. Hopefully you've watched it before you're talking to me or listening to me. Let's see.
Jeremy disagreeing over which of them is the bigger threat.
What a funny little discussion. Did you notice that? Catch that between Jeremy and Ben? And they were kind of almost arguing about which of them might be the biggest threat. It's Survivor. Whether you really are the biggest threat or not, you're not going to admit that you are to whomever you're talking. And so it's a silly waste of time and silly argument on both of their parts, both trying to point out for their own reasons why the other person is the bigger target. But there was a subtlety on Ben's face. Just like, what do you mean? You're the bigger... You were supposed to go, he did not say out loud. But that's what's in his mind. He's sitting there like it's a real argument in real life. Like there's no Survivor gameplay going on. And what's wrong with you, Jeremy? You would have been voted out if you didn't make some stupid move. You're the target. I'm not a target. Here in that instance, I thought, oh, Ben... your focus isn't as sharp as I wanted. It's not really happening there. You shouldn't be egging on the negativity between you and Jeremy. Even if you're frustrated, let it go. Be the better player. Use that dynamic to figure out how to move forward from there. Jeremy could be an asset to you at some point. Here, right away, maybe. Funny. I love the effect of unexpectedness in the game of Survivor. Here's Michelle talking about how she can't even play. She's talking with Kim and she's expressing how I can't even play in the midst of all this chaos. That's the game, baby. That's the game. That's when it's on. That's when the brain has to be on. All of what you'd done to that point, all of that had to have been preparation to enable you to be making the best choices you can in the midst of chaos. And the chaos is a result of unexpectedness. Not expecting Jeremy to not be voted off, not to know what is the right move next, wondering what happened and who might have done something that they didn't say they were going to do. All of that is what Michelle is referring to when she says chaos, because that's what's happening.
I love watching Tony thinking at camp.
I do.
Now Tony's ready to move, gonna look for those idols. Everybody's exhausted after tribal, so he thinks he can do it.
Okay, back to Tony. Oh my gosh. If you've been watching my recaps, you've watched my evolution with respect to how I perceived Tony could play and how I describe Tony actually playing. So my concerns early on were that Tony might not even be capable of focus or calm. And his freneticism that preceded him was all I thought he was capable of doing. I thought he had an awareness of a lot that was going on, but I did not feel. I felt like his win was so lucky because it was so haphazard that at any point, his quick choices and running around and freneticism could have cost him the game. I thought that's all he might do in this game too, and it's not. Even as the game progresses, his focus is sharpened. He came in with a plan to obviously be calmer, to do everything he knew to do to not be as distracted and off-kilter and frenetic as he had been. And I think to some extent, even though part of his personality, he's great to watch, is going to be dynamic anyway. It's going to be kind of more energized than most. I still think he did somehow get a little more focused and calmer than I'd imagined he might be capable. Well, now, here he is thinking at camp in the beginning here at episode 11. He's thinking, and it's fun to watch. And he's expressing even the idea that maybe now it's time to flip-flop. Maybe now it's time to make those crazy Tony moves. Maybe now it's time to kind of let the valve, let the steam out a little bit and stop tamping it all down. And he may be right. It has to be done in a relatively contained way, but it may be time to really just push now. Time to, let's see where I can take this game. Because remember, anybody who wins is going to have to justify their win. And Tony will be challenged about being haphazard because that's his history. And if he's not, and here he has evidence that he's not being haphazard, he's planning, he's thinking, should I now kind of move into full tilt, kind of move ahead and stop being so calm and reserved? Well, I guess I'd never call him reserved, or calm. But anyway, showing it, getting in, making the moves that are a little risky, but if he doesn't take the chance, might not pay off. So I'm loving it. Yeah, it's very funny to me how Tony is had to probably hold off from looking for idols, is what he said. He said now he's going to look for idols because he didn't want to be perceived as looking for idols. Good for him that it didn't seem to have been a detriment up to now, but looking for idols is something I think you always have to do. You have to find a way to do it without it being so kind of off-putting to other people. I think that's relatively easy to do.
Oop, Nick's awake. Is he going to catch Tony?
I love that. Nick wakes up, wanders out to kind of do the same thing and encounters Tony looking. No drama from either of them. They both pretend as if this is fine. I don't even think Nick was pretending. He's just like, oh, somebody's up looking for an idol. Tony's like, oh, damn. I didn't want Nick walking in on me. I didn't want anybody knowing. And what does Tony do? He sends Nick off to the water bucket or wherever, where he'd already searched for the idol. To search for the idol, and Nick's like, oh, good idea, we'll search in two different places. Oh, way to move these pawns around the game, Tony. Listen, I gotta find somebody else in this game. I gotta stop because too many kudos to you. And I don't know. Maybe I won't stop. I'm enjoying it. If you keep playing like this, you know you've got a good shot to win. And I'm loving the way you're playing. So I'm gonna keep giving you kudos, giving you the praise you deserve. Good move. I want to talk. Oh, this will be fun though. When I get to talk to you and Sarah, I want to find out why it doesn't feel, at least in the edit, as if you're including your Cops R Us partner as closely as I'd thought you might. I was going back and forth wondering about whether or not your alliance could be really solid and really trusted. We all know that at some point, in some circumstances, one of you might need to, and would need to eventually, get rid of the other one. But until that point, or until it was close, I had thought there might be a more skillful bond between the two of you. I feel as if Sarah has kind of been left to like a sail in the wind, kind of wondering if she can trust what you're doing or saying, not knowing really what's happening, trying to do her own thing while tied to you. And I'm not sensing that you're including her as much. And it might have to do with your frustration with whether or not you think she's going to go along or going to follow your perspective. So it'll be interesting. I look forward to talking to both of you. Yeah. Okay, so the Sarah, kind of the sail flapping in the wind thing is what I'm thinking. And then what the heck is Sarah doing with her clothing line, talking about being creative, etc. Well, what's she doing? She's claiming she has a social game and Tony doesn't. And this kind of fashion show clothing line thing is, I think, a part of Sarah's evidence that she has a social game. And I agree. I agree that involving yourself in these kinds of things, particularly when they aren't off-putting to the others, and there's a little levity, so long as you're aware and watching and control, I think she is good, and that's great for a social game. But I worry that Sarah might be missing it a little bit if she doesn't think that almost by default, Tony has a certain social game. So what do I mean by that? Tony's social game doesn't appear as intentionally put together and as intentionally positive as is Sarah's. But something that emanates from Tony is easy to watch, almost giggly at times, not for Sarah because she's supposed to be an ally and she's frustrated by him, but other people who are only slightly frustrated by him kind of like being frustrated by him because they figure that frustration will put attention on him as opposed to them as potential targets for being voted off. So there are different ways to play social games, and Tony isn't offending people yet. His haphazardness would be offensive to me if I were somehow allied with him. And I would try and communicate that to him clearly and strongly so that he could prevent me from feeling that way. But if I couldn't trust what he and I were doing together, then I would have to expand those alliances to prevent my being damaged by Tony's freneticism. I wouldn't just wallow in what seems to be the negativity and the frustration and the stress Sarah appears to be feeling toward Tony. But anyway, the fashion show was fun. You know, that's the thing out there. there aren't really rules or guidelines to your day. And so it's not as if, oh, we're going to have 3 meals a day and we're going to sit and we're going to relax during those times and then we're going to rest afterwards because we're full. There is a lot of time to fill. And that time is all being used differently by different people to ascertain what we think of one another. And it changes on a dime. And that's where that adaptability is so important. And so when Sarah makes this kind of a fun event take place and it's distracting, it can be really valuable. It can kind of lower the tension and allow her to impact people in ways that are thought of as positive. And then those people who are impacted that way don't even know that they are drawn to her more, might give her the benefit of the doubt, maybe feel more positively toward her. And all you need sometimes is to be felt more positively toward than someone else in order to get a benefit of a doubt. Subtle, sophisticated, unplannable almost game, this crazy thing called Survivor. Oh, but fun. Tony is playing hard. Tony is telling Jeremy he's on his side. Jeremy believes him. Tony has Michelle believing that he's on Jeremy's side. Tony is clearly not. He's talking to us, sharing with the camera that he's going to use that kind of fake alliance if he can. He's willing to play both sides, to flip-flop. When Tony talked at the beginning of the episode about it might be time, I'm ready, let's go, maybe it's time to flip-flop, this is what he's talking about. It's not flip-flop like a fish anywhere, it's flip-flop with intention from one group who think they're aligned with him to another with whom he believes he is actually aligned. And then using those dynamics without telling everyone involved that they're happening to the best of his ability. What's wonderful for me are watching the people around react. Michelle buys his game. Jeremy's buying what he's saying. Kim isn't. And Kim isn't shouting it from the rooftops. She's pointing it out as necessary, as best she can, and recognizing the resistance people have to her concerns or to her warning that Tony is flipping and flopping. And since there is the resistance, Kim doesn't push. Kim accepts that she believes that and tells us about it, but she doesn't push anybody. Good gameplay. It's awesome. If people believe things, they often don't want you to point out what's true. I think reality matters, but a lot of people don't. And when their emotions are invested in the game of Survivor, they don't want you pointing out where they're wrong very often. You have to be very careful about that. And Kim does it brilliantly. But all the while, we know, or at least as best we can tell, Kim's perception of Tony is accurate. He's flipping, he's flopping, he's unconcerned about the way in which he is assuring Jeremy so wholeheartedly that you don't believe me? You don't believe? Come on, you got to believe. I'm telling you the truth, blatantly lying. And doing it well. This is Survivor. This is not a moral issue. This is the game. These are the rules within the context of the game. This is Survivor. This is the gameplay. This isn't a moral issue. This isn't an ethical issue. This is the game. Outwit, outlast, outplay. And Jeremy's caught in the web. He just is. And Tony's spun it beautifully and continuing to spin. Forward. Good for you, Tone. I mean, really. I'm not sure how many times I can say good for you, Tony, but it's happening a lot lately. I'm smiling. It's good gameplay. So we see our first footage of the edge of extinction in this episode. And tell me these people don't look like they're suffering. I mean, Yule's meditating, but he just looks almost like in pain, just all covered up, and looks like he's freezing. And the shots of the flag, torn to shreds, ripped in the wind. I don't know. The island looks like they are in rough shape. It looks like they're suffering. And that's kind of fun. Here they are depleted. And what, out of the blue, weirdly, in some, like near the sand, Natalie sees this bottle in the sand. She pulls it up. And there's an advantage that Parvati, who's with her, and Natalie are reading. And the advantage is something different. I don't think we've ever seen it before. It's an extortion advantage. So these women get to extort or try to extort any one of the players for as much as they think they can get from them. Well, that's interesting. There's so many dynamics that have to be considered when you think about what request you make in your extortion. So they get to tell a player that unless they pay them, and they've decided 6 fire tokens, whomever they try to extort will not be able to participate in the immunity challenge, and neither will he or she have a vote in tribal council. Wow. So I thought Parvati's explanation was awesome. She said, so we need to find someone with a ton of energy, somebody who really wants those things, and somebody who will work to make sure that they get the fire tokens that they're asking for. And they nailed it. They pick Tony, and they tell him that unless he gives them 6 fire tokens, he loses the immunity, the opportunity at the immunity challenge, and he loses his vote at tribal council. Predictably, as they had planned and thought and hoped, Tony goes into full gear, asking people, going to his fake alliance, trying to get fire tokens from them, and he gets one from Jeremy, of all people. Good for him, because Jeremy believes Tony is in his alliance. And then he gets the rest from his real alliance, the people with whom he really feels like he's in alliance. Now, I've got to say, I would have worked much harder than Jeremy, than Ben, than anyone to whom Tony went trying to get fire tokens. I would have worked much harder to explain to Tony why I couldn't give him fire tokens. Whether I didn't have them, whether I only had X and needed it for Y, whether I would have done something, I don't know what, but I would have made efforts that I didn't see any of these people make to prevent Tony from getting those fire tokens. Did I want Tony to be able to vote? Yes. But were there many, many, many other options in the subtleties of this game of Survivor that might have sufficed rather than give away fire tokens? Yes, and I didn't see those being played. Even the fact that others probably wouldn't have known about this extortion advantage. They may not have known that Tony wasn't going to vote. They may not have known all kinds of things had Tony not been able to pay the extortion. I would have worked to not give up my safety. I think that was, well, and we watched. That was a huge mistake. Tony pays off the extortion, pays the bribe, is able to compete in the immunity challenge, and wins. Of course he does. That's just, making the Survivor story great. So he wins. And then what? With Tony having immunity, even the people who gave him, and having one immunity, he wins 2 more fire tokens. Even the people who gave him the tokens don't have immunity. And so they're more at risk than they would have been if they hadn't given him any tokens. There just needed to be a little bit more thought involved. And so here I go again. So brilliantly played by Tony. The energy, the lack of shame, the willingness to just go for it and try and get these tokens from whomever he could get them, and for whatever reasons made the most sense. Good for him. Just extraordinary, just rare. We just don't have a sufficient number of Survivor players playing at this level, willing to think, capable of thinking in these ways and enacting instantaneously, quickly, these kinds of plans that move one's game forward and are phenomenal fuel for your argument if you do end up at the end in this game. I mean, how can you counter this kind of gameplay? You know, the jury is going to be wooed with evidence like this. And Tony knows that. It was really funny, though. I forgot to mention when Tony was reading the note, how happy he was that he'd found it in his bag. He was so excited. Oh, he's thinking it's an advantage until he gets to the end and boom, switch off. Oh, being played against you. I loved it. That's part of what makes Tony really compelling for we viewers, watching him that way. And as a person, he's just likable when you see him be that expressive, particularly with us, knowing that he's just doing his best to communicate honestly and openly how he's feeling and what's going on when he isn't surrounded by other players who has to be more cautious, where he has to be more cautious. Here, Tony wins the immunity challenge. And he got the tokens in order to be able to even play it. He would never have been in a position to do that, to get the tokens from these other people, to be in that immunity challenge and then to win it, were it not for all of how he played up until that point. Think about how many other of the winners at war in this season could have gone to other people and said, hey, can you give me some fire tokens so that I don't lose my vote? So that I don't lose an opportunity to get immunity? I don't know how many of the other ones would have been able to ask that or would have had positive responses like Tony did and got tokens from people. That's all about how Tony has played up until this point. Something to note. So you saw it. Comes down to Ben, Jeremy, and Tony in the statue challenge. Ben's out, Jeremy drops, and Tony wins. That's something, right? Oy, oy, oy. Couldn't have even played were he not able to have gotten those tokens. Cannot express enough the dynamics that were so important and so well played that brought Tony to this place. Jeez, peepers. Good on him.
Jeremy's the one that enabled Tony to get into the challenge by giving him a token.
And in the challenge that Tony just won, if Jeremy had not given him a token, he may not have been able to he may not have even been able to play the challenge. Jeremy would have won it. Bad Jeremy. Bad Jeremy. Jeremy needed to be more skeptical about Tony's loyalty all along, and Jeremy needed to be more selfish about, even if Tony were part of Jeremy's alliance, how to protect Jeremy himself. Jeremy was just a little too free. He shouldn't have given Tony the token.
Again, Kim's logic is awesome. This puts Tony's winning the immunity challenge puts a target on Tony's back. And Kim knows he's playing Jeremy.
Oh, so Kim again makes a really great point. Here she's talking about having, now that Tony won the statue challenge, there should be a target on his back. I don't know that that's happened. I think Tony's enthusiasm and, oh my gosh, I won-ishness might even prevent the target from being as laser focused as it ought to be, and as Kim is right about it should be. But again, I love the way these are comments that Kim knows she's processed and she's sharing with us, as opposed to whining about them to others or openly sharing everything she thinks about. even with her alliance members. Good on her. Yeah, it is funny, isn't it? In the dynamics that are unfolding as they move toward tribal council, Jeremy's so certain that Tony is voting with Jeremy. And I have to say, even though I know what happened and watched it all unfold, I love the calmness with which Sophie plays the game. Sophie is very aware too. And I think somehow by watching so much of the drama at a relatively heightened level this episode, wouldn't you say? That Sophie may have been lulled into believing that all of that she watched, all of that drama was all that was going on. And I think that's what happened, because, here, boom, off she goes. She's voted out. But I think it was still a really well-played game on her part. Sometimes we can be bamboozled when we really aren't aware of what might happen. Even when I was bamboozled in All Stars, I kind of had an idea that could happen. They were telling me it wouldn't, but, I was at least there. I don't think Sophie was even thinking that she was in anyone's sights. And those are the times when you really got to, not in a paranoid way, but carefully recalculate possibilities, so that if there are ways to make sure you're protected, you take whatever actions necessary to do so.
There's a crazy irony in how, in the midst of Tony being Tony, with that energy of Tony, which I used to call frenetic, and it's much more organized this time, is somewhat kind of calm and organized. Bizarre.
It really is. And so much credit is due to him. He organized Sophie's removal. He thought it through. He took the steps necessary. There's a strange organization, almost a calmness, but at least an organization to his pathway forward. It will be difficult if anyone finds themselves up against Tony to counter his arguments for assertive gameplay. He's taken the bull by the horns all the way through. Sophie, to go with an idol in your pocket. That's a toughie. But to think you are a bottom tier player, that's too bad. Even from your original season, even when I watched you win, I was really impressed with your understanding of the game, your awareness of it, your ability to process what was happening, your ability to communicate that processing to the audience, to viewers. So I wouldn't have called you a bottom tier player, and I still wouldn't. I don't consider you that way. It's too bad that is part of your self-perception. Your skills are notable. And if you were, I guess, what would I do to tweak your gameplay? More confident. If you were a bit more confident in your rational observations, sufficiently to act slightly more assertively, I think the game could be yours. Yeah, far from a bottom tier player. Good job, Sophie. Sophie talked at the end about never having been blindsided before and how it's a traumatic experience. It is. Believe it or not, that's the nature of blindsiding. The word is so common now, particularly among Survivor fans, that I think sometimes we might lose awareness with respect to just how jolting, just how emotionally upsetting such an event can be. When one is truly blindsided, truly didn't see it coming at all, then everything has to be questioned. You have to go back in your head and examine what you could have done or shouldn't have done, or it's nothing that is resolved quickly and easily. You can give people kudos. Oh, good job. You can not get angry because it's a game. But understanding what went wrong and what you could have, how you could have adjusted will take some processing. And that's emotional. Great episode, right? Yeah, I think so. Episode 11, season 40, Winners at War. We're playing Survivor now. Enjoy the show. 80% of you who are listening to these videos have not subscribed to my channel. Please subscribe. Just hit the subscription button and hit the notification button, and you'll be informed when I have another video up for you to listen to. After you've subscribed, comment. Comment positively, comment negatively. No holds barred. Just say what you're thinking. That's what will make our exchange even more valuable. As I'm able, I'll create new videos responsive to that commentary. So like away, or dislike, on that rare occasion you may feel the need to do so. But either way, thank you.